right, welcome, Wake Up Humans. And guys, we want to thank you. This podcast has been blowing up. It's been a blessing, helping change people's lives and reaching new people every day. And we appreciate you sharing with all your friends. Keep doing so. Keep following us and enjoying it. And we've got a special treat this week. I reconnected with there's people you meet in your life and you're never disconnected. And it was 15 years since we've seen each other, and I felt like it was yesterday. And we decided to get him on the podcast just because he's an absolutely brilliant soul. I wouldn't say brilliant mind because he is, but he is a spiritual being that we'll learn about here today. Let's welcome from Lake Tahoe, Dr. Stu Bittman. What's up, brother?
Hey, thank you, Steve. It's really great to reconnect with you.
It's good to see you, man.
And listen, I love what you said. That's so true, man. I never felt disconnected, but still fun to reconnect.
So we met back in, I think it was 1996 in Panama, Central America. Right.
We met on the first Panama mission when you were still in school or just out of school, or
I remember I was sitting next to you and Lena on the bus from the airport, and Lena was the one putting on the trip, and I was still a student, and they weren't sure. There's a couple of us students, and they weren't sure what they were going to do with us, and I'd already been on a mission to Russia, and I'm like, you guys are going to need our help. We're going to be adjusting. And they said, all right, we'll see how it goes. And you just kind of smiled at me like, all right, I think I like this guy.
And I knew you were destined to help a lot of people, Steve.
Yeah, I remember you saying that. I remember you saying that one night, and that meant a lot to me, man, because, I was a young, where was I going with myself? I kind of had a huge vision, but to have someone, and I want to pull this out of, people are going to learn this about you, is you're a highly connected individual. And that means a lot to someone like me. And when you look me in the eye and say you're going to be doing some big things, that felt good, man. I appreciate it.
And it was one of the few predictions I made that actually was accurate.
So we reconnected at Mile High in Colorado this year. We both spoke there, and it was like I look across the room, bro. You haven't aged. You haven't aged at all. What's your secret? What's your secret?
Your eyes are obviously going. It's very nice of you. It's very nice of you, though.
So yes. Let's give people a background on who is the younger Stu, Bittman, like, and start bringing it forward to where we're at today.
Okay, well, like I told you before, this could take a while, but I'll leave out some of the details. I graduated from LACC, as it was called, in 1986. 35 years ago, April 12th. So did what I learned at LACC, which was not chiropractic, as you well know,
right?
For several years. And I was the valedictorian at LACC, so I had a lot to unlearn. So I was really well versed in stuff that I had no idea what it was about or why I was doing it.
Right.
But and yeah, kind of like Sigafoos' story, I used to really get nervous when new people were coming in because I really didn't know what I was supposed to do, or didn't feel like I didn't feel right about what I was doing in a lot of ways. So it wasn't until I went to a Parker seminar 4 or 5 years after I graduated, and I actually heard Sigafoos and walked out on him first time. Similarly, and I loved hearing later in life that he did the same thing when the first time he heard Sid. He walked out of the room. But similarly, the next year, somebody talked me into going back to Parker, and I heard him again. And this time, I like to say that he changed everything he said, but I know that's not true. Something changed in me, and I just caught the fire, and it filled this big hole in my chest. It's hard to describe, but everything I believed before, which was mostly science, I saw in that moment was kind of bullshit. And or at least not to be relied upon, or not to build anything upon. And so that was kind of disconcerting, because then I didn't have anything to build anything on, but started going to every philosophy thing I could find, mostly Sigafoos, but Reggie and everybody who was available at the time, and and started on a whole different track and with a whole different purpose. And then, I've started going to Sigafoos' gathering, the workshop that he put on, personal development thing, did a lot of work on myself, still working on myself. That's an ongoing project. And yeah, and then I was at an ICA thing, an ICA relicensing seminar, and Lena got up there and said, "We're going to Panama." And something in me, even though that was hard to get my head around at the time, uh, I just said yes. And fortunately, I called my wife on a break and told her about it, and she said yes too, because by that time my mind had already kicked in with all the reasons why I couldn't do it, shouldn't do it. But we went, and that was the one you were on, man. And I don't know if you've told people about it, but we could talk about that. Still my favorite mission, the first one. I've been six times to Panama now and a couple of other places, but that first one, because we didn't know what to expect, and so therefore we didn't have any specific expectations. We didn't go, as happened in later missions, just to see incredible numbers of people, because we really had no idea how many people we'd see.
Right.
But we did see a lot of people and went back several times over those next few years. And the third time, of course, I think it was the biggest. We saw close to 400,000 people, or adjusted close to 400,000 people. So
Insane.
yeah, that obviously changed me. And then I dedicated my life and my practice to being the person I was in Panama and the chiropractor I was in Panama. I know a lot of guys, a lot of people who went on that trip came back and just complained that it could never be the same in where they lived as it was in Panama.
Yeah.
But I think they missed the point, kind of thing, because I think you would agree what was very different there was us. We were completely unattached. We were practicing chiropractic. I mean, we were living that giving, loving, and serving thing. And
Well,
in my experience,
I think the biggest thing is what people, I did a lot of mission trips, and I realized that the mission trip was more for me. In the beginning, I felt like I was going for the people to help them. And when I see these people walking around barefoot on dirt roads, and they're smiling, and they're living in clay huts, and there's grandma, grandpa, the kids running around barefoot, and they're cooking their rice and beans, and they're happy, like they're connected. And I'm like, wait a minute, I'm here to learn something. And I think one of the principles that you talk about, these docs that left the trip and it was just, they complained and nothing's the same, because they stayed in their head, man. Mm-hmm. They didn't go into their spirit, their soul. It was, and I think that's the thing that gets lost. And, I want to go to the point where you talked about, here's a guy that was valedictorian, which means you're a smart dude, the smartest in your doctoral class, who then turns around and says science is bullshit, and you had to unlearn what you learned in school. There's a huge principle there I'd like to pull out of you. It's like, okay, what does that mean? Like, I'm thinking about the layperson right now, especially a non-chiropractor who's a businessman. I got CEOs who listen to this are going, holy shit, that was a bomb. What the hell does that mean?
Oh yeah, well, thank you, because I probably just take that sort of thing for granted at this point. But yeah, I had a lot of head knowledge. I mean, school filled me with all kinds of knowledge, but that's not where that's not where service needs to come from. That's not the wisest part of me. It's just, what BJ Palmer, the developer of chiropractic, called pilastering, like just layering stuff on top of what your heart already knows. Chiropractic's a very simple thing. It's like the most simple thing. It's just life. Right. And everything, a lot of stuff I learned in school was just complicating it, and just, it was just about heads and what's normal. And of course, that whole concept is flawed, because I haven't met this person yet. Right. I haven't met the 120/80 straight spine, all those things we're supposed to be person. They've never walked into my office, and I've seen tens of thousands of people in my office, or did. So yeah, the head just gets in the way, I guess, is the easiest way to put it in my case. And science isn't bullshit but if we put it in perspective, I think it was always meant to just explain things that already were. I mean, gravity obviously existed before Newton got clonked on the head by the apple.
One of the funny things is I remember I was probably in like fourth grade, and we were learning how to use a ruler, and we had to draw straight lines. And the teacher said, that's a good straight line. That's a good straight line. And my ruler had a tiny little nick in it. And she said, that's a good straight line. And I said, I don't believe there's such thing as a straight line. And she looked at me like, what? I said, how do you know it's straight? She said, you look at it, it's straight. But I said, who said it's straight? How can you tell it's perfectly straight? And it was kind of silly at the time, but it's like gravity. 9.8 meters per second squared is the number we give to it. But we're giving to it because we created an algorithm or an instrument to say that. But how do we know that instrument is 100% correct?
Absolutely. We just agree. We just decided to agree.
Oh, okay. We're going to call that. Okay, that makes sense.
Uh-huh.
So that's when you wake up one day and you say science is bullshit. It's not to say that there's not value in science, but you and I know, being students and going through a doctorate program, the answers that were correct on my test back in 1996 are completely wrong now.
Absolutely.
Blows my mind. And raising 5 kids, putting them through school, I always tell them, don't let school get in the way of your education, because, and I think that's the bigger thing I've learned through chiropractic and mission trips and meeting people like you. Chiropractic's a philosophy and a way of life. Like, what I want to learn from you and share with our people is your way of life. Like, for a valedictorian to go from his head to his heart to his spirit, because I feel like you're a spiritually guided individual, right?
Yes.
And that's how you operate. How do people get there? What is that walk like?
It's a beautiful walk. And it starts right where you are. I guess if you're going to make that walk, the first thing I would suggest is don't try to see the end. Like one step at a time, because every step of the way bears wonderful fruit, bears beautiful fruit. It's all joyous work. It's not even work, so maybe to invest people in the idea that it's going to be horrible or it's going to be a lot of work. No, man, I think our heart only knows joy and only knows love and only knows peace. So every step we get closer to that means we're experiencing more of that in every moment. So somebody obviously had to convince me of that at first, because maybe I caught a glimpse. Panama was a glimpse. So that's, and the first time I did this weird stuff called holotropic breath work at a Sigafoos gathering, where you just breathe real heavy and all kinds of crazy stuff comes up. I decided after these experiences that I weren't going to see them just as isolated experiences. They were actually giving me a glimpse of what was the truest part of me and the truest part of my anatomy, being my heart. It was a glimpse of what is possible. And like you said, yeah, I started to look at the mission trips as training. They were helping people, obviously, but you're right. They were training for me, because the mission was in life. The mission was in my office. I didn't have to go to Panama to live that mission, but I had to go there to see what was possible. So once I saw it was possible, I just moved every day in that direction. Like a big part was not being attached to a lot of stuff, because that's all head stuff. And as you know, in Panama, we weren't able to attach to anything, because you and I, being masterful Spanish people, especially in those days, we knew nothing at all. So we could tell when people were in pain or something, but we could not attach to results. We were probably not seeing that person again anyway. We weren't attached to what they thought of us, because we didn't know. Even though we had a pretty good idea, they were pretty happy with us. All the stuff, we had nothing head wise to attach to. So it was a beautiful exercise. We were almost forced to come from our hearts, and then to see not only how that felt for me, but how it worked, how well it worked. So every day I made things simpler. And I started to do, obviously, a lot of practices, like heart-based practices, and shedding a lot of my attachments and a lot of my fears. And I had a lot of help with that, with Sigafoos and Dick Santo and all those wonderful teachers that we had.
I think what people need to realize is you don't have to go at it alone. Like you keep rolling off names of people who were mentors. You walked in on Sigafoos speaking at a conference, and you walked out because it blindsided you. You weren't ready for the message.
Right.
But the blessing was you received it the second time. It was like something cracked open. And you know, you hit the nail on the head with the mission trip thing, because I think it was my 6th mission trip where I said, my mission trip's in America. Like, it's one thing to get on a plane and go to these other countries and everything, but these people are okay. Like, I'll adjust them till the cows come home, but they're more spiritually connected than we are in the States right now. And this was going back, you know, and you know, like you said, I don't speak Spanish. You know, I was that kid in high school. My brother spoke fluent Spanish. So when I went to high school, they all thought I was going to speak fluent Spanish. And I looked the teacher in the eye. I said, they need to learn to speak English. And she said, well, how do you know if you're ever going to be on a train in another country and they're all speaking Spanish? I said, that'll never happen. And then I wake up going to Panama 6 or 7 times. And I don't, so the only thing I had was my eyes, my smile, and my faith. And all I would tell these people is, you know, Dios, and I would point above down, and then I would mimic a subluxation of the Atlas, no Dios. And they would go, ah, then you adjust them and they'd get up and smile and laugh and bring the whole family the next day. It's pretty much how I've grown my practice. You know, God created you to be self-healing, self-regulating. You just got to be connected to that. Whether you believe in him or not, it's what created you. And subluxations block the expression of that. You know, I think, you know, so let's talk about love, because I know it was a part of my life. I had a really hard time with love, and Panama changed that for me, getting around like you and Paula, because you guys just, you know, just like a white light of love, man. And I was like this kid out of New York that was just, you know, angry and fired up. And I felt that energy, you know, and when I started talking energy with people, they thought it was like voodoo stuff. And you know, when I went to Cologne, Panama, which is one of their toughest neighborhoods, they sent us with their national wrestling champion to protect us. And they brought us into their training, their boxing arena gym. And these dudes were badasses. So no one knew what to do. We had never been there. So I picked the biggest guy, started talking to him in whatever gibberish I could talk. I got him to kneel down, put him on the knee chest table, and lit him up. And then I just started laughing, and because his eyes lit up, and I'm like, this dude's either going to knock me out. And the whole room started laughing. So they started grabbing people, and it broke the ice. And it was like that different form of communication that built the trust. But what I've learned now is you had to be love. So what is love in Stu's words? What is that in your reality?
Yeah, obviously a hard thing to define, but I think the closest I can get is that it is a recognition of our oneness, a recognition of our sameness. It's not like intense liking. I could probably say a lot of things about what it's not. It's not like I like this person enough to love them. No, I mean, liking is a perception. Loving is a knowing. Loving is a soul thing. Loving is a recognition. It's like a waking up to the fact that you and I are one. And so going back to your other question, my head just gets in the way of all that.
Right.
You know, because my head is focused on differences. You know, even though maybe 99% of everything between me and this other person is the same. You know, my mind's going to grasp on what's wrong, what's missing, what's different. And so, yeah, that's not love. Well, that's just sort of filtering love or blocking love. So, yeah, that's the best way I could define it, as it's an energy of connection. It's to me, love is the glue that holds the universe together in oneness. So
in my lifetime, I think we're in probably the most disconnected society ever. How can we change that?
Just put me in charge. I'm kidding there, by the way. How do we change that? Well, you know,
I mean, think about that. Innately, that drops in, put me in charge. If you put, you know, I'll use the word spiritually guided people to put their word of advice out there. I mean, I think that's what we have to have, is more people speaking up. Like, I find myself having a lot of, especially in the office, a lot of conversations where people are really like, you know, we just got to be more connected. We have to be more loving. We have to be more forgiving. Let people make their choices and not judge. And I said, that's great that we're having this conversation one-on-one, but we have to speak out now to the masses, to the community, and start just breaking that ice. Like, that's my thought.
I definitely agree. You know, and so it's a dance. You know, I think it's really important for us to, first of all, maybe learn to love ourselves. because as long as there's a big disconnect there, it's going to be really hard to walk that journey from head to heart, I think. So that's why, so it's a dance, but you can do that by serving other people. You can do that by speaking out and doing the things you're doing. So, and I asked this to Sigafus one time. I said, is it better to work on yourself so you can get yourself to the point where you could serve others in an impactful way, or is it better to serve others and learn about yourself that way? And he looked at me and he said, what's the difference? And it was kind of a typical Sigafus answer. And at first it kind of pissed me off a little bit, like he was. But then I thought about it, like a lot of his answers, and yeah, it's all the same because it's all one. So
Right.
get in there any way you can. If you have issues with yourself, and we all do. We all know things about ourselves that nobody else does, and maybe there's a little shred in all of us of, well, if everybody knew that about me, they wouldn't love me either, or something like that. But again, I think it's important to realize that love and like are not the same thing. There's so many reasons why it's very true to love yourself, and it's not conceited, it's not arrogant. In fact, to me, it's arrogant to not love yourself. It's saying like God had a bad day, or the universe is all in balance and perfect and wonderful and harmonious and at ease except for me, and I'm the only thing that's wrong or flawed. And so that's obviously wrong. That's obviously not true. So I'm getting all over the place here, but I think that's a really important part of it. Again, if we have all kinds of conditions around loving ourselves, if we can only love ourselves when the numbers are high enough, or if the money is enough, or if enough people are telling us we're wonderful, or something like that, it's going to be a problem. It's going to be hard to tap into that energy of connection and oneness because we're blocking it off right inside ourselves.
I think about, where do we stop loving ourselves?
Mm.
And in my journey, I realized it really wasn't my fault. I mean, I was just a young kid learning from what I was exposed to, through my parents. And I was exposed from their life experiences and how they handled life and how they dictated their expression of love and what their outcomes were and what they weren't. And I thought that was the way. And then you wake up one day and you say, no, I get around these other people and I'm like, there's another way.
Mm-hmm.
And it's simpler. So that I have my answer of what I think it is, but where do you think people start, or how they fall out of love with themselves? Like, how could that possibly happen?
Well, it can happen a lot of ways. I mean, for one thing, I believe it's culturally frowned upon to love yourself or to say you love yourself. It's considered egotistical or something like that. Again, I think we're confusing love and like. I mean, there's nothing wrong with liking yourself either, by no means, but it could happen because, I mean, I think of Sigafus. He had a father who told him he was a bum and would never amount to anything. You certainly will tend to believe that of the people you love and trust the most at a young age. I think it gets set up at a young age either way, but it's not only because people tell you you're no good. I just think sometimes you see that you don't have as much of an impact on the world with your mechanisms as you would have liked, or whatever. I think it is self-inflicted. Definitely not our fault. Because
Let's speak
yeah,
to,
we're too young. We're just too young to discern at that point, or we don't have the tools to deal with it. So we get that sort of program set up that it must be my fault, or and certainly if we had any trauma, like if our parents had issues, it's easy to take on the fact that you were somehow to blame for that. So there's a lot of reasons. We have vivid imaginations. That's probably the main answer to that question. But
I think unfortunately what happens is, it's things that, what I'm finding with people when I work with them is it's what happened to them from their parents that they carry into their adulthood. And the ultimate healing process is, and this is what I want to start talking about now, is healing, is addressing those things. So for an example, let's take a 40-year-old man or woman whose father said, you'll never amount to something, or you bring nothing but stress to me, or they were physically harmful to him, and these people wake up as adults, they're married, they have a couple kids, they're stressed, and they choose drugs, alcohol, things like that to suppress it. I'm sure you've seen this thousands of times within your practice, is transitioning people over to that healing process. What does that look like in your world?
It looks very similar to how it looks in your world. I think it's like, first of all, it's epidemic.
Yeah.
If we have a true epidemic in the world right now, I think that's it. People don't feel like they're enough. People don't feel like they matter. People don't feel they make a difference. Um, so healing begins with, whatever you need to do to know that that's not true, and to start disempowering that line of thinking, because it's just electrochemical activity in the brain. That's all it is. And it was set up, again, it was set up at a time where we didn't have the tools, we didn't have the awareness, we didn't have the level of discernment we have now. So I think the key, if we're really going to break it down, is getting into the present moment. And there's a wonderful tool that Dick Santo taught us at the gathering, which is, when I start entertaining non-loving thoughts about myself, or go back to old patterns, or lapse into people pleasing, which was my mechanism for a lot of my life, which means I never spoke my truth, or backed down from telling the truth for many years. So when that would happen, I would get this sensation in my solar plexus. I'd get this tightness in I call it the pit. And I think a lot of people get something like that. They get a body sensation that's kind of telling them they're off. They're not being congruent with their values. They're maybe doing something out of expedience that they learned when they were 2. Like for me, when my dad would say, just wait or excuse me, when my mom would say, just wait till your dad gets home. And I learned when I was 2 that if I just ran away and hid in my room, I usually avoid the beating, because my mom would forget, or whatever, right? So here I am, a chiropractor 30 years later, and I'm still running away. And then I'm beating myself up about it, because I've been to so many seminars that told me I shouldn't be doing that. So I'm like digging this well of self not in love deeper and deeper. So the tool was, when I get that feeling, Dickie taught us to say, I love this feeling. It's a very powerful tool. I love this feeling. And I usually add, and I'm saying it with absolute honesty, I love this feeling because this is my innate intelligence trying to help me survive. This is something I convinced my innate intelligence I needed to do in order to be okay in this world when I was very young, which means to run away, or to avoid conflict, or just please people at all costs.
Right.
So the amazing thing is, when I say I love this feeling and I tell myself why, the feeling goes away. Mm. And then I'm free to remember my deeper intentions in life, which are to love and to speak my truth and to stand in my truth. So it's very, very easy at that point, without the pit in my stomach, to pay attention to my intention rather than my old mechanisms, my old conditioning. And then I could easily say something like, especially if they, if it's a guy that comes in and says, I don't want to hear what you do, I just want an adjustment, blah, blah, blah. Whereas in the past, I would do it and then go into my office and beat myself up for doing it. Now it's so easy with the pit gone to say, you know what, sir, that's not what I do. If you would like to hear what I do, come on back, because I would love to share it with you. If not, I'm happy to send you somewhere where they could take care of your whatever.
And a lot right? A lot of times those become the best patients.
They do. You're right, and that's what I found. But I didn't find that when I was just doing whatever they wanted. So that's just a tool that I think could be really helpful. It was the beginning of my healing. Just first of all, to become aware of how often that happened, and how often I was unaware, just to bring it into your awareness that you have a choice. It wasn't our fault that we get up, that these mechanisms got set up, but it is kind of our fault if we just keep following that same pathway when we know better. And we just lapse into sleep.
I think it's realizing you have a choice, right? I think where education and modern day science pulls choice away from people, which takes their thinking mechanism away. And when you talk about the pit in your stomach, it's essentially a symptom, right? So patients come in and they want to share all their symptoms, and we let them. And I say symptoms are the greatest thing for you because it's your body talking to you. It's the innate talking to you, letting us know there's an issue, right? Now, how you choose to define it is going to create the outcome. So like Dickie was teaching you is, welcome it, own it.
Yes.
But let it flow through you. Don't let it live there. Like
Yeah,
now
yeah.
your thoughts and your spoken word, the Bible says, as a man thinketh, so he is. What you're going to create the energy out of it is what you'll allow it to become or not. And by just saying, I accept it and I'm not, you're not going to stay here.
Well, yeah, we were told to walk through the valley of the shadow of death, not pitch a tent,
That's good. I like that one. I like that one.
A lot of us like pitching a tent there, and then telling everybody how horrible it is. So
people want to talk. People want to talk about their problems and how bad things is. I mean, every day you got people coming in, and it's almost a prideful badge of honor. I have anxiety. I have anxiety. I have anxiety. I'm like, what is anxiety? Like, why are you proud of that badge? Like, let's move on. But they got to go through that healing process.
Yes.
And that's a space I'd like to go through. Is your bit of your experience with over 30 years of chiropractic is when people start getting adjusted. Did it make the process of healing easier or tougher for them from your experience? And what did you see?
It could certainly make it initially tougher because I can't even describe how many people started with me and, within 2 weeks had some recurrence of something big or some massive symptom expression or some, retracing event or just some emotional upheaval. So if you don't sort of orient people or prepare them for that, you can lose a lot of people.
How did you help them through that? How did you help them heal through that process?
I would tell them, really sophisticated scientific things like, if you came in here with an arrow in you and I yanked the arrow out, do you think it would feel better right away?
That's a good one.
And they would say, probably not. I say, well, you're right, but have we removed a major impediment to your healing? And they would say, yes. I said, okay, hang in there,
Right.
now, it's one of the things I like. But Brad Glowacki says, the healing, I don't know if he made it up, but that the healing happens between the adjustments, right? So, right. So that's a really important thing to teach people or to share with people. And they know it, I say teach in the true sense of the word educate, which is to draw out, which is obviously consistent with our philosophy.
Well, education has them brainwashed that we're not supposed to feel. We're not supposed to hurt.
Right.
If we feel any pain, you cover it up, you mask it, you drug it, you pill it. And then they come to us, and now we turn the lights on in their body, and their body wakes up and says, "Oh boy, let's get to work." I tell people, you get food poisoning, you throw up. Is that good or bad? And they're like, it's good because it's getting rid of the junk. Well, now we start adjusting it. 20% of the people are going to have more symptoms because their body is working double time to heal.
Sure. Right.
And
or they have more symptoms just because they're in their body again.
Right.
And they're aware of what's going on. So, that's why it can be a little hard at first. But certainly if you've, at least welcome people up to the possibility of that and what healing really is and what's going to be happening. It's not what they're used to, because they're used to healing meaning something else. But that's, as you and I know, is not healing. It's masking, or that's as Sisyphus used to say, like painting over their oil light when their oil light comes on in their car. Nobody would be happy about that, but
it's a matter of time.
Yeah, it is a matter of time.
So
I think it obviously makes healing easier because it's what makes healing possible. But having said that, I think it's important, especially as chiropractors, to remember that, and it's a cliche, we're not the ones doing it. In fact, the only reason people can heal is because they're already whole. That's a really important thing to remember. And if we can get a little shred of that into people's awareness, and again, not that we have to inject it into people's awareness, we just have to help them remember, then that's a big part of the deal. They're already whole. So, and then all healing is just a movement in that direction, or connection to that, or obviously a removal of interference so that can express again. So how can you do that? How can you heal without
Right.
the interference removed? It's just not going to happen.
Well, the
So yeah,
interference, yeah, that, I mean, when people realize the nervous system is what controls every system, it's also it's connecting you to all your emotions.
sure. It's our very
So,
experience of life. I think
and
of Dick Santo again. We wouldn't even be a vegetable. We wouldn't even move toward the sun
right, right, right.
without a nerve system. So yes, our entire experience of life, everything. Isn't
I
that
think
why
it,
we could go to Panama and not know what was wrong with people and adjust them, and then hear that the crime rate in Panama City went down or something like that? I
yeah.
mean, I
Well, in Cologne, the next day we went back to that. It was I think it was where Roberto Duran grew up. It was a tough neighborhood. The next day
we
we
were
went
told
back.
not to go.
Yeah, they told us not to go, and then we said we're going, and they had this giant. It made me look small. The next day he wasn't with us. We didn't need him. They loved us. They came. The first day we adjusted a couple hundred people. The next day it was a couple thousand people. By the end of the week, it was 10,000 people, and they were bringing us food and gifts and holding their kids by their hands. Guys with tattooed faces were hugging us. It was wild, man. I mean, it was. It's like you sit there and you go, "What really happened there?" And it was love. It
Of
was energy. They realized that we were there to give out of our own abundance. And when we connected them, there was people that were coming back the next day that were deaf in their right ear and they could hear. People that hadn't slept in 11 years would average an hour of sleep and they slept. Stories that I just stood there like, this is absolutely, like, interpreters were just rolling things off. And I'm like, dude, I adjusted their atlas and that happened in a day or two. How? And then you finally throw your hands in the air and it's just, it's innate. It's this
of
intelligence that's in everybody. And if I'm connected and they trust me and I release that interference and that thing wakes up inside of them, it's an immediate transformation. Immediate.
Panama was absolute proof and evidence of all of that you just said. For me,
Yeah,
that's
man.
exactly what it was. We had the same experience in the maximum security prisons.
Mm-hmm.
Where the guards were scarier than the inmates, I thought. And
Yeah.
they were running around loose, the guards. But yeah, hugging, they were like hugging each other, the guards and the inmates after we were there, hugging us. It was like just shedding everything. Like just shedding all.
I've had kids say to me, "How do you know there's a God?" I said, "If I took you to some of the places I was in the world, and I couldn't communicate through language with the people, I know there's a God protecting me." Because I look back now that I'm pulled away from it, and I look and I say, if my son said, "Hey, Dad, I want to go to that same place," I would probably try to talk him out of it. Now that I educatedly know, what I was walking into, and I'm like, God, and we help make the place a better place by adjusting them, which is bewildering. And I know people say, "How the hell is an adjustment?" I thought it was for sciatica because it unites man the physical, man the spiritual. End of story.
End of story.
End of
And
story.
you approached it with beautiful intention. So that's what helped. That's what changed the place too. Was
Right.
we didn't. And you're right. When I went to Cologne, so you did that trip like every day on the first mission. It was rather
Yeah.
long. It was a rather long, windy drive.
It
I,
was. It was. Yeah. It was ugly. I mean,
I
we were
only
in
went to
there.
Cologne once, and it was unfortunately the night after Sigafus and I decided to drink too much tequila. So
Ha!
I made the bus driver stop saying I had to urinate, but it was actually for another reason. but
Ah!
but that's another thing, like I got there and 10 minutes later I had forgotten all about my hangover and about how I felt. Again, just it was such an amazing training
It was.
experience, these things, to see what happens when you get out of your, not only out of your head, but out of your woes and and out of your perceptions of what's going
Right.
on,
Right.
and just into that space of love. It was beautiful. And it
It
was cool
is.
that I heard about Cologne kind of after the fact too,
Yeah.
because
No. I knew when I had that bodyguard in front of me, and it was like you couldn't see me standing behind him. I said, "Where are we going?" Like, And this little girl was like, we're going into, this is a bad area. And I said, and I lived in the Bronx for 6 years. I was in tough areas, and I knew, okay, it's your energy. It's how you're walking. It's how your eyes, how everything is. And there was a couple docs that were pretty nervous that were there. And I said, don't let them see it. Don't let them see your fear. You just got to get quiet and peaceful and loving and just have faith. But,
and remember why you're here. Yeah.
and it's like God has us here. Ultimately, God has us here for a purpose. I mean, it's like you could go preach to the choir and to the people that already have it, or you could go into the tough areas and preach it. And that's where the souls need to be connected. And I think that's where the major shift in the world takes place, when you're able to give yourself that space and
Sweet. And I never felt so safe in my life.
Yeah. I didn't think about it really when I was there, other than for that quick moment. I look back now and I'm like, whoa, that was crazy. So let's start wrapping this up, man. So Stu, how old are you now?
65.
65. Awesome. So I always like to project where I'm going in my life by mentors that are ahead of me. What are the next 50 years of your life look like here? Like what does 65 and up look like for you now? What are you doing?
I'm just getting going. I'm well, I guess the most honest answer is I don't know, because especially I don't know the specifics of where my life is going, but I just know it's going to go in a similar direction of toward the heart, toward serving. I was doing a lot of traveling, so I'm having to rethink that. So right now I'm coaching and doing a lot of Zoom stuff and doing a regular weekly Zoom gathering, and I think I'll be doing more of that, but I really feel I haven't quite found my thing yet.
Well, my innate's telling me that, you get a thought flash or something you want to share, you just text me, we'll get you on here. Another thought that just popped in too is we do like a coffee talk. We get me, you, and Peter.
Oh, beautiful.
People have heard Peter, and we just talk, man, because I know get you guys going. I mean, I think the gems that'll pop out of, your voices need to be heard. I mean, it's and I want to help do that.
Oh, I love that idea, because he's one of my favorite people.
Yeah. I think of you two guys, and I'll throw this out there to the listeners. There's a book called The Way of the Peaceful Warrior by Dan Millman, and everyone should read that book. And it's like you and Peter are like spiritual guides. Like you're the guys that Peter was a valedictorian too.
Yes.
You know what I mean? So it's like, I wasn't a valedictorian. I got through because God said, all right, we need you to get out there and just be a little crazy, and we're going to help you pass all your tests. But, I feel like we're in one of the greatest times in society right now for people to wake up. It's just getting the right voices out there. It's like you walked out on Sigafoos and you heard it the second time and you went in there and it changed your entire life. And that's the path we're on now, is that one sentence that'll transform someone from their mind to their spirit, that'll wake them up, and then they can transform more lives. So
I love it.
And I got one final question for you. So
yes.
For those that are just listening, behind you, you're sitting in a room, which reminds me of my personal office, where there's shit all over the walls and there's things that, and I know for a man to turn around and staple something to the wall or tack it on a piece of paper, it really has to mean something. So what is the one thing in that room that resonates and means the most to you? Because there's probably 200 things tacked to that wall behind you.
There's a Panama flag right over here.
Yeah.
That's the one. I got to think. This is actually my daughter has 2 rooms in my 1,100 square foot house, and she hasn't lived here for like 10 years. So I'm not exactly sure how to explain it. So this whole room is like a shrine to my daughter, and it's a lot of her artwork and stuff. But the Panama flags, she was on all those missions.
Yeah.
I know you know that. She went on that first mission. She was 9 years old or something. And so I think that would be a life-changing and a world-changing thing if all Western world kids went on some kind of mission trip just to see, like what you said, just to see that values and material stuff have zero correlation. that it has nothing to do with it. So that's what a lot of the stuff in this room always reminds me of like you said, that they had nothing, but they wanted to share it all with you. and they wanted to invite you into their homes, and they just, and they were completely in exchange just with their blessings and the lottery tickets they would bring us and the food. So yeah, that's what a lot of the stuff back there reminds me of. So
that's awesome.
Get to see one of my
beautiful soul, man.
Thank you, my friend. I love you too. It's really good to see you.
I know this is going to be a really good one for people. I feel like if they really just sit back and listen, there's a lot of bombs in there. I mean, I've got a full page of notes here, and it's like one of my biggest challenges is always giving it a title that kind of will bring people in. And it's tough with guys like you, man, because there's so many ways you could go with it. So I think it's just over time, people listen, and it's going to open them up, and they're going to want more. So we'll connect more. So I know you're a spiritual being, and a thought drops in. You just text me. We'll make it happen, brother. So,
great. I will. I will for sure. This was beautiful fun.
Awesome, man.
And thank you for all you're doing, and congratulations. My podcast has reached every continent but Antarctica, so which is amazing to me too. So
what's the name of your podcast?
It's called Stew on This. And
STEW or STU?
It's STEW on this. If you don't put in the dashes, it won't come up on Amazon. Not Amazon, okay. Apple Podcasts. Yeah, so it's everywhere.
Okay, all right. We'll make sure
on this, and it's not an interview format, so they're all like, I think I'm at 109 episodes, but they're all like between 7. Some are even shorter. I think the longest one is 12 or 14 minutes. So they're cool for little short bursts or drives to work. People tell me.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect. Oh, I didn't know you had that, bro. I'm gonna check.
All right. Well, good. Well, I told you I'd love to have you once I figured out how to have guests, because usually I sit here and I record with my phone. Right. So when I have my recording studio set up, I'd love to have you too.
Amen.
It's great to reconnect with you.
All right, brother. We love you.
Thank you for making my prediction come true.
My pleasure.
Yeah.
I'm glad he made it happen.
And I bet a lot of people are glad about that.
Amen.
All right. Till next time.
All right, pal. We love and appreciate you big time.
Take care.
Ciao. Oh